Hello, everyone. I hope you found the conference so far to be enjoyable and enlightening. I'd like to welcome you to this panel session, which is discussing the future of light festivals. The first part of this session, the panel conversation, will last about an hour. And following this session, there will be a 5 to 10 minute conference summation from the Light Up the North Chair and Wishart, and then a 5-minute break. After that, you will be invited to stay, if you can, to go into one of the 3 breakout rooms, where you'll be able to ask questions of the panelists and meet each other. These rooms will last for 45 minutes, and you'll be able to choose after the panel session which room to go into. Room 1 is Funding Advice with Arts Council England. Room 2 is Meet the Producers, and room 3 will be Meet the Artists. And you will be able to hop about, move between the rooms should you wish to. If you are staying for the breakout rooms after the panel session, just hang around in this Zoom at the end of the session and joining instructions will be given for that. So throughout the panel session, please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom to say hello and also ask questions. If you are asking a question, could you try to remember to put a capital Q in front of your question, which will help us to pick them out afterwards quickly. And at the end of the panel session, we'll aim to leave enough time to get to as many of those questions as we can. I'm going to be chairing the panel today. My name is Julie Brown, and I'm the Artistic Director of Light Up Lancaster Festival, which is one of the partner festivals of Light Up the North. I've been involved with that festival since it started in 2012. And in my other life, with another hat on, I'm also the Executive Director of Imitating the Dog Company. And Imitating the Dog make theatre and also projection mapping projects. So we have 6 panelists today joining me, and they're all waiting patiently in another Zoom room. So I'm going to introduce them now one by one. And as I do so, I'll speak briefly about them, but you'll see their bios appear hopefully in the chat, so you get a bit more information. If we were doing this in real life, I'd like to imagine we had a glittery curtain and a smoke machine and fantastic lighting, of course. Let's all try and imagine that. Here they come. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Bettina Peltz. Welcome, Bettina. Bettina is an international curator and academic who's been specialising in light-based art since 2000. And Bettina currently curates Flux in Ingolstadt and Interference in Tunis. And there's the more information appearing in your chat. Hello, Bettina, welcome.
Hey, Julie, thanks for the invite.
I'd next like to welcome David Edmonds. Here he comes. And David is the festival's director at the Arches Festival for 7 Arts. And in January this year, David led the inaugural Light Night Worcester event. And David has over 20 years experience of working in outdoor arts and large scale events. Hello, David.
Good afternoon.
Next joining us is Hannah Fox, and Hannah is an artist working in public spaces, both indoors and out. And for 30 years, she's created images, installations, and site-specific performances worldwide. She works in several contexts, including making work for light festivals. Hello, Hannah, how are you? Oh, we might have to unmute yourself, Hannah, I think. Let's have a look. Yes, we can hear you.
Here we are. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Hannah.
Hi, Hannah, thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome Deborah Best. Deborah is Combined Arts Relationship Manager with Arts Council England, and she's based in the Yorkshire office. Deborah is the lead for light festivals in the North and has the relationship with the Light Up the North network. And here's Deborah. Deborah, if you could just unmute yourself and we'll just test we can hear you all right. Hi, Deborah.
Hi.
Great.
Hello, everyone.
Great. Next up, we have Alison Clark. Alison has got a 25-year career in arts and culture leadership. She's currently Head of Culture, Sport and Tourism at Durham County Council, where her role includes commissioning Lumiere. Previously, Alison spent 15 years with Arts Council England. Hi, Alison. If you could unmute yourself and we can hear you say hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. And next is Maggie Clark. Maggie is the founder and director of Extracts, an organisation that develops and runs showcases, events and festivals in the UK and internationally. And Maggie is also founder member of the Without Walls Consortium. If you could unmute yourself, Maggie, and welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you. So as I mentioned, you should see panelist info in the chat, so you can have more information and links to them. And then last but not least, I want to welcome Shumit Sarkar. Shumit is a sculptor and painter working with digital and analog techniques. He takes inspiration from a variety of sources, including religious iconography, science fiction, and graffiti. And his recent work is inspired by VR and 3D process. Now, Shumit, we can see his screen, but we can't see him at the minute. But Shumit is a sculptor and painter, and he works with digital and analog techniques. You've had that. Shumit will be doing something really special today. He'll be making a piece of work live during our panel events as we chat. So you'll be able to see his progress as he goes along. Welcome, Shumit. Will you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing? You might have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, yeah, I'm Shumit. I'm going to be using the software I use, which I normally use to digitally design sculptures. I get them made using whatever, like 3D print or marble, and then quite interested in interplaying that with augmented reality. Anyway, this is the software I use to do some of that sculpting. My work is usually quite abstract, but I figured something figurative would be more tangible. So I'm going to start with a face and just sort of see where it goes. So you should be able to see the screen. Okay.
Oh, that's brilliant. Shumit, just before you go, because people will want to know, what is the software that you're using?
Oh, sorry, yes. So I'm using Blender, which is open source software, meaning it's totally free, which is part of the reason I champion it and I continue to use it. It's great for education. You can go to a school and teach it and everyone can go home and keep using it. And I'm using a graphics tablet, but you don't need one of these to use Blender. You can use it just as effectively with a mouse or a tablet. So, yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
And the software itself is Blender. It's 3D modeling. You can do all sorts in there. You can do animation, 3D modeling. I've used it for video mapping and animation. So it's a very versatile project. It's free, so I'm not selling anything. So, yeah.
That's great. Thanks for letting us know. Right. So you've got an hour or so of making. So go.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thanks everyone. Really appreciate you joining us today for this panel event. So I'm going to open up the discussion with a sort of unavoidable question, really. And I know it's been touched on in other sessions during the conference so far, but before we sort of get too involved in the future of light festivals, there's an elephant in the room, isn't there? So I want to ask our panelists really about the current situation we all find ourselves in. So the question is really, how are festivals responding to the impact of COVID-19? And David, are you all right? I'd like to come to you first with that one, if that's all right.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying it's been incredibly challenging for everybody in life, not just kind of in our sector. But I think what we've seen is our sector is full of people who are brilliant problem solvers. And I think we've seen work still able to happen. We've seen some events and festivals still go ahead under kind of COVID restrictions and people problem solving and kind of coming up with ideas. So I think, we've seen brilliant pieces of work from people like Illuminos with the Sentinels project they did in Manchester with the key workers projected into the trees. We've seen obviously the Leeds City of Light in terms of the laser and kind of that interaction, whereas, Leeds Light Night is such a huge event normally that actually the fact it still had a presence and still sort of artists and festivals are desperate to engage with their audience. And there hasn't been that sort of overwhelming tide of everybody just jumping in, like, let's just put digital content out there for the sake of it. I think we've been a bit more creative than that. I think inevitably a lot of festivals have cancelled or postponed, but I think that's allowed us to really look at what we want to do going forward. And I know from our perspective in Worcester, we've really looked at that time of what we want Light Night 21 to be, and we embarked on a commissioning process, which has been really good, that we probably wouldn't have done without the kind of pandemic. So yeah, I think it's been a challenging, tough time, but I think we've been resourceful as well, and little gems of stuff have sort of happened that have kept us all kind of, you know, in better spirits, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that. Maggie, I mean, your work covers light art, but also a much wider spectrum of outdoor arts and festivals and so on. So really, it's the same sort of question. How would you say that festivals are responding to this impact?
Yes, well, I mean, very much as David said, really, it's quite a mixed picture. Within the work that we do with Without Walls, we've been speaking really regularly throughout the whole of the lockdown periods with our network of over 30 festivals up and down the country. And I think, as we all know, you know, the COVID situation has not impacted all of the areas equally. You know, it's a very mixed picture up and down the country, and kind of different local authorities are in different situations. Even now, as we speak, you know, some people are in, you know, we know that people are in different tiers, and that affects what's possible. But I think, I suppose some of the general things that I would say is, like, as well as what David has said around, you know, kind of people being very resourceful and wanting to problem solve and wanting to use the fact that we are all festival organisers working in public space, you know, and public space has been given a new importance in the context of lockdown. Everyone's had to interact with it in a completely different way, while so many of our performance venues remain closed. And people that have never worked outdoors before have been looking to kind of try and move into that space, which for us is a really exciting opportunity. And I think for the people that have spent, you know, years kind of specializing in this area of work, there's a lot of learning that is already taking place, and that I think can still take place in kind of helping our colleagues in other sectors who maybe are less used to working in some of the challenges that go with working in public space. It can help them along the way. But in terms of other general trends, I think, you know, with the obvious restrictions on travel and what is possible to do, there is this real sense of kind of hyper-locality, which I think has it has provided some great opportunities actually for people to think about how they might want to experience work, and people, and you know, the artists that we work with in our sector being incredibly inventive about how they can use their skills and experience to take work to people in the communities where they're living. And you know, lots of work going on people's doorsteps that is really exciting. There's been a big leaning towards, you know, sort of a lot of our work is very performance based, not always, but you know, we are, you know, we love the live element of it, and that is obviously the live and interactive element is part of why a lot of people really enjoy outdoor arts festivals. But in the context of COVID, when we're in the situation of social distancing, with more restrictions about how we can bring people together and the kind of numbers, there is a bigger focus on installations. There is a bigger focus on work that is non-performative. And I think actually a lot of people who might never have experimented as festival organisers with light festivals are looking at doing that, especially now as we get into the kind of, you know, the winter months, and people are actually able to, you know, think about how festivals and events might be able to be part of a recovery program, because, you know, we know that this has decimated our high streets, our shopping centres, our kind of, you know, our economic centres. And I think those organisers are looking at, where possible, are looking at how arts events could be part of that recovery. Although I wouldn't want to overstate that, because I think we are still, you know, I feel so privileged to work with Without Walls, the fact that we do get the opportunity to speak to so many different types of organisers, and we have quite a lot of local authorities within our network. And some local authorities are still dealing with getting emergency services to vulnerable people. And it's not every local authority that is able to kind of think about what the economic recovery is quite yet. But I think that's partly why for us as organisers, it's really exciting to kind of look at how we can kind of put a menu of exciting opportunities in front of people, and kind of really be there as festival organisers to kind of help, you know, light the way, if you like, to kind of how we might be able to kind of provide something that is really exciting for audiences to do. Because I'm in Manchester. I've been in lockdown since, you know, for almost all of the year. I'm absolutely bereft of the opportunity to experience art. So when there are things coming forward, which there are some really beautiful projects happening on a kind of primarily local basis, that is so exciting. And I know that's the same for so many audiences. The only other thing I would say about festivals is that forward facing, it is really difficult for festival organisers to confirm their booking arrangements for the following year. So I think there is this whole sort of, you know, rather frightening kind of logjam of all the festivals that had to be cancelled this year, wanting to then try and remount those projects next year. And I think, you know, we, as festival organisers, and there's a network of festivals, but there's also a commissioning network, we are very conscious of the impact that that is having on artists and the wider artistic community and the freelancers and all the people that go on to make these events happen. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Somebody I spoke to earlier today referred to that as the concertina effect, that everything will be sort of crammed into a short amount of time, or our timescales have gone out of the window, but this notion that everything will come back online. So it really is that. And I think, you know, I want to speak from a spirit of optimism about what I think the arts can do and how I think the festival sector will be able to kind of help with the recovery in some way. But I also don't want to be naive and overlook the impact that this has had on so many people, and that we're going to be living with this for a long time. Bettina, and lastly on this one, you're joining us today from Germany. Thank you for that. So just from from your perspective, I mean, you know, you're working across, you're working internationally, but from your perspective, the same sort of question really: how are festivals, as you know, responding to the impact of COVID-19?
I can confirm everything what David, Hannah, and Maggie said. So it's basically the same in that network that I am cruising in. But let me maybe highlight some aspects. So I saw a lot of intensification of remote control production. So because of the lack of, because of the missing possibility of traveling, we built international teams of artists so that we could produce with artists from the US in Germany, or with artists from France in Tunisia. So artists helping artists to producing their works on site without traveling. So I think that's a quite interesting development. We did that occasionally before, but this year this became an important factor, and this kind of solidarity to have shared action, I think that was very nice. And of course it leads to new forms and to new future projects as well. I think maybe we will come back to that in the discussion as well, this solidarity moment, and that helping each other, even there was no financial support sometimes for the local artists producing the other artists' works and this kind of thing. So I think that was very interesting. I think as well that there was more space for experimentation because we don't have to care so much about the numbers. So numbers that are usually a big part of what we call success. Now it turned into the opposite. So we were looking for small numbers, controlled environments, safe situations, and that led to a lot of smaller projects, often led by artists or curators, that were able to respond to that situation, so that the impact or the pressure of the success in the audience, or the number of audience, was lower this year. And I think this is great, and I would be very, very happy if we can continue with this kind of development. I think it opens us a way of how to improve the quality of festivals of light in general. If that pressure would be down in the future, I think it would be great. I'm saying that on the background of of course, as you all know, very successful activities. So if I have 100 people per night, I'm pretty sad. And if I have 20,000 people per night, I'm quite okay. So this is the range I'm working in. And maybe a last point, I wanted to point out that the audience I experienced was extremely flexible, responding to shifting dates. So usually we would never change the date of a festival because we said this is known and people will not manage, and we had to change dates more often, more than once. And the audience was very attentive, following the changes and following up the whole process, and was very solidaric at that point as well. I found that interesting as well.
It is really interesting. Thank you. That very interesting point. I mean, leaders really neatly. So if we could possibly leave COVID behind, wouldn't we all be very happy with that? But let's just focus on the future. And really my next question that I wanted to ask was around the future. How might light festivals in particular develop in the future? How should they? What would you like to see going forward? And Bettina's already started our conversation on that, which is great. Alison, would you mind if I come to you with that, with your broad overview and experience?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And yeah, I'm coming to this from a really interesting perspective. So having spent the last 6 years within the Arts Council, responsible for festivals, for policy, for funding, for thinking about how they should and ought to work, to then moving into a local authority, which is the commissioner for what I'd like to think is the best light festival in the UK, working with the Amazing Artichoke. Those two things are quite different to each other. So the difference between the policy and the actual making it happen are quite different. So for me, I think we've heard quite a lot from the first three speakers, which kind of point to what the future sort of could and should be. I mean, if I may, we would rather have not gone through a terrible pandemic to get to this point, but some of the things which I think we've heard and which I think point to the future are actually things we should have been thinking of anyway, and in lots of cases were. So so in terms of the future, it feels quite hybrid. So it feels to me that there's a bigger set of choices and a bigger set of options. So the kind of marrying up of the digital and the virtual with the live experience, I think opens up a lot of different potential. I think that there's and again, given what people have been through, we've been through a painful experience collectively. I think that given that light festivals, in fact, festivals more broadly, but there's something specific about light, which gives you a collective experience. There's something about the way which the art is made, which also brings meaning to the collective experience, because often the kind of spectacle and the wow factor is a big part of those festivals, but the sort of meaning behind them, I think will become more important. And then, at a very sort of practical level, in terms of the future, the way that people want to move in a space and what that space is, I think points to where the future might take us. So for instance, a lot of the festivals which are part of our network here are in urban centres, thinking about sort of landscape-based events and installations where people are more dispersed, I think is part of the sort of future thinking. Thinking about work which is both that sort of hyper-local Maggie mentioned, but then also can now quite easily work with artists who are working internationally, because you can plan, you can program, you can make things collectively at a distance now. So we've sort of tried all these things during COVID, which I think point to, and then this is me speaking really as a sort of pure local authority person, the ability to be able to, in a winter 2021, when a lot of these festivals will hopefully come back, to be able to sort of collectively breathe a sigh of relief in a space together, I think is going to be a huge asset.
Mm-hmm. And Deborah, from your perspective, the same sort of question really, how do you think light festivals might develop in the future?
Again, just reflecting on the work of what Maggie and David and Bettina was saying, I think they have identified some of the ways that we might be moving. And in some respects, I'm hesitant to prescribe how light festivals could or should develop in the future, because the festival commissioners, the creative producers, and the artists making the work have that remit to determine how they are in the future. However, I can say a little about the way in which Arts Council has funded light festivals in recent times. And in particular, I think looking to the future, future of light festivals will be bright, shiny, in terms of our Let's Create 10-year strategy. So over the last 3 years, we've invested through our National Lottery project grants £3.5 million of investment into varying scales and types of light festivals, from small community lantern parades to specific communities, and in villages to large scale festivals in cities and town centres. Some of which blend light art and other art forms such as performance, whether that be music or theatre, or performance which incorporates fire. We've funded individual artists' projects that have, for example, allowed them to experiment with LED lighting, projection mapping, neon, working virtually with colleagues in other locations internationally, from working with digital technologies in order that they can increase the way in which the work that they create engages with audiences and specific communities. We've funded artist development residencies and international commissioning of light works for festivals in England. We've tended not to fund architectural lighting or commercial lights events. And we've also invested, as you're probably aware, in Light Up the North network for the last 4 years. So we are really committed to the development of light festivals going forward. The things that have made light festivals particularly attractive to Arts Council are their accessibility, and there's, you know, they don't have to cross the door of a library. They don't have to go through into a lobby of a theatre before going into see the performance. And for many, light festivals could be their first time experience of seeing contemporary art at scale in their hometown, on their street, which is what we've seen a lot of just recently. We've had numerous applications for national project grants for work which is on their street and on their doorstep, the hyperlocal, as Maggie referred to earlier. For me, they're exciting. They're festivals providing an opportunity to wander around my city and feel safe, to enjoy that with family groups and people of all ages. And I think that's what we would like to see more of in the future. So for the future, it's about absolutely relevant work and making sure that we see new work being created, and thinking about how it relates to the place that they live in. How do we support artists at all points in their careers is also important to look forward to in the future. How do we do it?
Yeah,
artists.
And we will come into that a bit more, I think, shortly. Thank you for that. Those answers really great. Hannah, I wanted to pick up on something that's already been touched upon a little bit, but quite often when we talk about the future of our festivals, certainly I do this, and I'm sure lots of other festival producers do, we talk about in terms of growth. So we talk about how will our festival grow in the future, and I know Bettina's touched on it, but several people have touched on it. But you know, Hannah, is bigger always better?
I suppose in a way, Julie, it depends on what your definition of growth is. I mean, growth could be seen as growing in scale and bigger budgets and more footfall and more artists commissioned and more works shown. But growth can also just be seen as more sustainable, more established, more recognised. So I suppose in a way it depends a little bit on your definition. But to take probably the question that you maybe specifically meant about bigger in scale, bigger.
Did really, yeah, that's right.
Better.
Yeah.
It's an important question. I mean, I feel that really it's kind of an irrelevant question. If you don't mind saying, not really. It's a very good question. But my question, I think the question is the question that came before that question. Yeah, and so you'll see what I mean by it. To do with what do you mean by that in terms of what's the motivation of the festival? What's the point of making the work? That's the question. Then you get to the answer really easily. So, for example, you know, what's the point of this piece of work you're doing? I mean, you know, what's the point of having a festival, a gathering, a collection, an event in a community? So, bigger, smaller, is bigger better? It really doesn't matter. It's got to be appropriate. That's the only answer, really. And I think what I mean by that is, sometimes it's fantastic to have massive festivals that wow people, that are bamboozling and exciting, and, you know, massive footfall, you know, great financial turnover, everyone's loving all of that, great stuff. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's what the point of your work is, the point of the occasion, the point of the event, and the validity of it for the place and time it's in, but if your motivation is completely different, and your motivation is to sort of, maybe you could say, possibly connect a little bit more deeply with people, with a place, maybe have some more subtlety in that connection, and some more resonance, and, you know, a little bit about, to do with what Alison was talking about earlier, maybe a little bit more honest collective sharing and collective cohesion and meaning, then quite probably smaller is better. So I don't think bigger or smaller is better or worse. I think it's to do with what's appropriate. And ultimately, it's about that question before, which is, what's your motivation? Why are you doing the thing that you're doing? Be it as a producer or a funder or a community leader that's trying to create an event.
Fantastic to hear that perspective. Thanks. Maggie, did you want to pick up on that at all? Just this question really of scale, I suppose, and experience, therefore the experience.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? But and I suppose, yeah, the scale obviously has to be tailored to the location and the type of the event. And I really love some of the smaller scale events. And, you know, earlier on in this year, in February, we had a meeting including some representatives from the North Network in Oldham, where they have a kind of what in comparison to something like Lumiere is a very tiny light festival, but it was fantastic and really well supported by the local community, and some fantastic high quality work, as well, including some work supported by the Without Walls network. I mean, the advantage of the big, of course, we all know, it's about the scale and the impact, and then that is then, you know, how you really advocate and how people begin to understand what the quality of the experience of a light festival can be. And I think many people who might not have the opportunity to go to a light festival in their local community might know about Lumiere just because it's always featured in such a massive way in our press and cultural media, and rightly so, because it's a major, significant, internationally significant event. But I think the other thing to say, of course, is that there is a kind of an economy of scale that is related to, you know, these events. The very big scale events are expensive. They're often very expensive because of the scale of the artwork that they're presenting, but also the infrastructure that needs to go into those things is enormous. And I think it's really interesting to kind of look at what we, you know, the scale then, you know, the cost of that means that you have to generate these enormous audiences in order to be able to justify that expenditure. And there's then something kind of quite, you know, that's then linking into kind of, you know, presumably a whole load of other economic agendas in the local area, you know, to do with tourism and kind of visitor economy and all of that kind of thing. It's very interesting though. I think, you know, a lot of our events that we work with in the Without Walls network, a lot of them do attract very, very large audiences, and our programming work on that understanding that there will be large audiences there. And it is very interesting because what's happened with COVID is that, you know, we all know that there are real challenges to that. And I think it then becomes a situation of, you know, when you know that it is not just impossible, it's actively illegal to present something that is going to attract people in large crowds. By what criteria are we judging the success of that event? And it's a very easy thing when you do deal with events, you know, in terms of the big outdoor festivals that we work with, you do, you know, you go very quickly to look at the audience numbers as a kind of a bit of a kind of barometer for the overall success of the event. And obviously we know, as artists and organisers, we know that that's not really the measure of the success or indeed the quality. But you know, we need to, I think, have a really interesting discussion with our stakeholders, our funders, and you know, ourselves, to kind of look at how we actually really want to measure things. And it was very interesting to hear Bettina talk about that, you know, the numbers are a challenge, you know, and how we measure things in the context of social distancing is going to be, you know, like everything to do with this pandemic, it's causing us to ask all kinds of questions, you know, and we've touched on some of them, the kind of relationship between, you know, the hybrid events that might be live in some ways and digital in others, which again, also, can we count our digital audience in a way that is actually meaningful in that way? Yeah, big question. Is big better? No, obviously not, but we can't ignore the importance of analysing the equation between big and audience numbers.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Really good. Thanks. I want to just move us on. So I've got a couple more questions, and that before we open up for some questions from attendees. So the question really next one I want to ask is about sustainability, and I mean environmental sustainability, but also we might touch on financially and artistically. I'd like to come to Alison if I could, and the question really is how can light festivals become more sustainable? Thanks, Alison.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think like lots of places, lots of artists, lots of people, the kind of green agenda is bigger than it ever has been, and in fact, COVID's made that even more so. And it probably sounds a bit trite, but we'll sort of make it happen by believing we have to make it happen. So you know, there's a load of sort of policies around most places around environmental sustainability, around making sure people sort of travel, you know, in a green way to a place, around making sure that the kind of medium we're using, the sort of light art, the digital, is as kind of tech based and therefore sort of energy use low as possible. And all of that, I just think, has to happen because A, that's the policy environment, and B, that's the right thing to do. And it's kind of genuinely down to the artists to make that, you know, to make that work. And I think we're seeing that in spades. And if I'm honest, the more robust the policy environment is, then the more of a mandate that gives the kind of creative sector to be able to make that happen. And in terms of the broader sustainability, there is and this is the case for all festivals, particularly large festivals. I know that big isn't always better, but the you know, and this is maybe a bit of a dirty word, but the kind of monetization of a whole set of people in a place having an amazing experience collectively, you know, how does that actually contribute kind of properly, not just in kind, properly to the budget of a festival? And that might sound like a sort of really crass bit of maths, but I still think we have to make that that kind of a connection. I mean, in Durham, the return on investment is something like 1,095%. You know, it is absolutely huge. Lumiere makes a huge impact on the visitor economy. The County Council puts £1 million in excess of to the festival each time round. You know, and yet still, the search for sponsors is always tough. The search to really sort of get local businesses to respond to the fact that they are, you know, it's their busiest time beyond Christmas. There is still something I think we probably have to do, which is being probably a little bit more crass about about what the finances are and what's needed and what the benefits are.
Okay, and Hannah, that was really interesting to hear Alison say that it really is down to the artists. I wonder what you as an artist might say to that. I mean, you might want to just answer more broadly to the question.
Oh no, how can light festivals become more sustainable? I think it's an absolutely crucial question. I don't think any of us can avoid it. I think it's absolutely paramount. You defined areas, how can they become more sustainable environmentally, financially and artistically? And I think my feeling about it is a couple of things. Those three areas are actually completely connected, and I think for me that's the key, is that yes, artists can make make decisions about how they go about making works more sustainably, and the choice of materials, and you know, the choice of like low energy bulbs and things like this, or thinking about waste and so on. But then financially, how their piece of work might be funded, well, there's a whole element there, because if that piece of work is funded in a way that it could maybe have a longer life, it could have more versions, you then are reusing the hardware that you have. That piece of work maybe has a 2-year duration then, rather than, as we know as artists, you often get the one event, you get the one commission, and then all that stuff goes back in storage or gets dismantled, and it's wasteful. And you know, hopefully all of us artists are reusing, rethinking, recycling, and reconnecting with bits of kit from other projects. But you know, the financial the funding of work, if that's considered environmentally and sustainably, well, maybe then things can have a longer duration, and it's all connected. That's my thing. So festival producers thinking about how you might go about siting work and commissioning work. If you've got a whole rig that you're going to set up for 1 year, think about, what does that all come down again at the end of that event, or does that become a semi-permanent thing in that town square? Let's say, for example, even if it's just a set of brackets on a wall, can they stay? Because next year you are going to use them again, you're intending to use them again, and that's a small decision in sustainability. And another there's 2 other things I would like to say about this. One is that then, looking slightly broader, if festivals were connected. So, and I know there's brilliant work in that area already. I know, for example, Julie, when I made a piece of work for Light Up Lancaster, it was also at the time that you commissioned actually this work, it already had a home at Preston Encounters and Lightpool in Blackpool. So we knew this piece of work was already going to be in 3 events. That's great, that's fantastic. So I suppose it's also about festivals working together and making plans together so that work can travel between festivals. Because brilliant, you know, if you're in Blackburn Town Centre and you're going to see a piece of work, well, you might not travel to Lancaster to see it again. It doesn't matter, it can appear again over there. So festivals working together. And finally, I'd just like to put a kind of a plea out, I suppose, for large commissions. So artists that have got a big profile, and artists that have, you know, either big companies or high profile commissions, you know, big budget gigs, like, you know, like the headliners, as it were, in a festival. I would really, really like to see these people leading the way, you know, leading by example, so that the really, really big gigs, the big commissions, the really impactful work that's maybe got the biggest budget on a festival, they are, you know, if they're sustainable and it's demonstrated, then smaller works, or artists who are trying to work on slightly smaller budgets and smaller commissions, who are trying to make these brilliantly important choices, it's really important that the big boys and girls are doing it, because otherwise it doesn't all stack up. Yeah, you know, if this person over here is blowing up an enormous thing and creating loads of toxic fumes and wasteful stuff, and this person over here is doing a quiet work that's really considered sustainably, it makes it hard, because then we all know that, you know, if you shout really loudly, then you're going to get your audience. So I think if we just all work collectively as a massive body of people saying this is our intention and it's across the board, that would be fantastic.
Right, thank you. That's very interesting. I'm going to ask a final question, and this is kind of to be considered by all the panel, really, but I will come to you individually. But the question really is around our role as festival producers, or as artists, or as stakeholders, to support light festivals going forward. And I'd like to come around to each of you, please, on that one. If you wish to answer, you can wave and say, I don't want to answer that question, if you like. But David, if you wouldn't mind, I'd come to you first.
Yeah, I think it's mixing. There's so many interesting threads kind of in that conversation that you could kind of like unpick already around, you know, sustainability. And I think, you know, just very quickly to say on Hannah's point, I think for me, one of the most exciting things could be where light-based artists are involved in civic planning. You know, the points Maggie was making about public realm spaces being used differently this year. If that changes and we start seeing more of the things we've seen, certainly outside of the UK, where artists work with architects, with city planners, and where that work here is permanently installed and has a life in the city beyond 3 amazing nights where we all come together and go, wasn't that brilliant? But then it's packed away and we go, oh, we'll plan the next one. So that feels really exciting. But I think our role, you know, we've looked this year to that commissioning model, because we felt, as Maggie said, there's so many artists that have not been able to work this year. And so we felt we wanted to commission work for our audience and to work with those artists to sort of give them the elevation of that platform and to kind of sort of position these really outstanding international artists alongside, you know, the likes of our graduate commissions, because we always offer a graduate commission. So it's trying to kind of give those opportunities, I think, to kind of have that work seen. I think the point that was made about, you know, connectivity with other festivals, this sector, outdoor arts is incredibly collaborative. When you then get to light-based work, it's even more so. And the conversations we had when we started in Worcester with other light festivals who were all, yeah, talk to this artist, we could help you with that. Have you thought about this? So encouraging that connectivity, that we go, well, if you're commissioning that in Lancaster, can we then take that to Worcester? Can it then go to Gloucester? And, you know, that element of kind of making sure that the work is more sustainable, there's more work for artists. And I guess my final point would be around challenging those artists to kind of, you know, work differently in terms of who aren't you talking to, in terms of whether that's writers. You know, there are more and more, as Maggie said, people from the creative sector wanting to now get involved in the festival world, which is brilliant. And those of us that have been involved in outdoor arts for many years are like, this is fantastic. But actually, how do we broker those relationships so it feels embedded and we take that further forward, and that we are talking to, you know, theatre writers and costume designers, but we're also talking to architects and city planners. So I think the future post this next 6 months is really exciting, and hopefully we'll have broken some things that needed to be broken in order that we can rebuild some stuff that's even more exciting.
That is an exciting thought. Thank you. Bettina, I know that you had some really interesting, when we've had a discussion before, some really interesting thoughts picking up on what David said about supporting and developing new work. So just the same sort of question, really. What is our role in that, really, to sort of strengthen the future of light festivals?
The same here as with David. There's so many threads in the discussion that I hope that we'll soon have a night in a bar, 24 hours, so that we can go through all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did note some aspects I would like to come back to. I think the responsibility for the more sustainable development of the festivals of light shouldn't be at the artists. This is like putting the freedom of the art to the artists. We are all responsible for that. We are curators, we are producers, so we should have an idea about that, and we should help artists to care for that. I find that quite important. And I think it would be great if Festivals of Light could pick up the policies of zero waste. In Tunis, we are doing that. It's a festival that is dedicated to the zero waste policy. So every material is followed up from where it's coming to where it's going. Everything what's printed, everything what's produced is controlled. And of course, we didn't manage in the first year. We started in 2016, but with every edition, we are getting closer to zero waste. And I think that should become a policy for the festivals. Second thing, in that environmental aspect, I think that the idea of picking up, of being ambassadors of the dark sky movement and of fighting light pollution is very much in all our interests. And it would be very, very good if Festivals of Light could pick up on that activity and care for these aspects in the festivals, and while doing that, promoting the care for the reduction of light pollution overall. So I think these two aspects. One last aspect to the eco aspect. We are all using a lot of digital tools. And I don't know if you're aware that the waste stream of e-waste, the fastest growing waste stream over the last years, it's only 10% of it, it's recycled and somehow formally processed. And we have a huge environmental issue coming up of that, with that. I think it would be great if Festivals of Light could pick up on this aspect of e-waste and how to care for future dealings and wheelings with it.
Great.
I think as well, the one aspect that David introduced is the education. I think we need light as a subject in the academies. I'm teaching at an art academy, and they are still teaching drawing and painting and everything, but light as the essential material of the visual sphere is not taught. And so we have a lot of knowledge missing, and artists have to find this knowledge in themselves or in their networks. I think it would be great if we can enhance that. There's some lighting designers managed quite well over the last 20 years. Artists didn't. So, so I think it would be good. And with that goes as well the idea of better documentation in image and text of the works. We have a lot of artists that only live in the Festivals of Light or in these light art projects because their technology is too new. Their approaches are too advanced for museums. The technician in the art association is not capable of dealing with what Shomit is doing here. So we have, because I'm for a long time in the field, so I know careers of artists that are depending on this field. So to help them to develop that further and to bridge the gap between the art institutions, that would be as well extremely helpful. And for that, we need academic research on what we are producing. I think the artistic creativity that we can see of artists working in light is amazing. And that's what we are all profiting from. I'm doing 2 or 3 festivals per year, and there's always artists there, and new artists and new voices, new approaches is fabulous, but we need to care for their further development. So documentation in image and text, critical review, evaluation, and that with academic standards would be great. So
you know, I'm so glad we're recording this because I feel like I want to be making notes, but I couldn't possibly note this fast enough. So I'm so glad we're recording this and go back to it. Thank you. We're going to run low on time. Okay. Deborah, that's sorry. Okay. That's all right.
I would agree with everything that's been said, but I would also just want to be a little bit more realistic in terms of like the immediate. We're seeing art and light festivals appearing in more government-funded programs, such as the Arts Council manages the Cultural Development Fund. But it's in these and other government funds that are likely to fund the work of artists in the future in terms of making the work, in terms of place-based work. And it's our role and also the roles of those commissioning festivals to make sure that they're working with local place-based initiatives to advocate for the inclusion of light festivals and the value of light festivals across a wide range of agendas that are relevant to those who have the purses. And what I'd also say is that I think what's becoming quite clear is that there are fewer obvious pathways for artists who are light practitioners to progress. And I think it's important that festivals that do emerging artist schemes continue to do so, but also that we look to develop artists' work collectively and collaboratively across festival programs so that the skills level, the knowledge level, and the development opportunities for them as practitioners can be accelerated. It's better to share the cost and to help prevent the environmental impact of light festivals by acting collaboratively and to make sure that the burden isn't paid just by one organisation but by a number of organisations working together, because I think it's very important that we see the future of light festivals as being important elements within each of the places that we live, particularly as we are in the Northern Hemisphere and have very dark nights for quite a while.
Yes, this is all so alarmingly true. We are running out of time, but I have just been given permission to go on for an extra 5 minutes, which will allow us to get us to a couple of questions. So, Alison, I do want to come to you, but also to just put you on the spot a little bit. We have had a question that's come in that's specifically for you. So maybe you can think about the broader question of how we support people going forward. But actually, the question came in from Dan Fox. And Dan's question was that he made a piece for Lumiere called Shimmer in 2017, and he says he was blown away by the numbers of people. There were about 50,000 a night or something like that. And he was asking quite specifically, really, how will Lumiere 2021 change its approach with the change in how people can share public space? And it's quite specific, but if you wanted to broaden it out, that's fine.
Specific, and I think that's exactly the question that most of the light festivals which are represented in this room are thinking about. And the short answer is that obviously Lumiere is a huge event. The producers, Artichoke, absolutely have this kind of specialism in these large scale events. Durham is a very, very small city, and the thinking, the planning, the kind of plan A, plan B, plan C, which will be as good as plan A would have been, are very much in the thinking right now. But I can't say for certain how that'll look.
I don't think anyone can say anything for certain.
No.
In the future, but that's a really helpful. Thank you very much, Maggie. I know we have a broader question about how we best support festivals going forward, how best support artists going forward. But there's also a question in the chat that you might also want to pick up on around accessibility, around making light festivals accessible for all, perhaps thinking about this in terms of the broader festival context that you're coming from. So the question is around how can we ensure light festivals are accessible for all, and specifically says in rural communities this can be an issue when even the cost of travel to a town or city centre can be a financial barrier. I wondered if you had any thoughts on that question in particular, or anybody.
I suppose the issue of making festivals of any kind accessible is one that, as festival organisers, is a responsibility that we all have. I think it's really important that we kind of really understand what the impact of the decisions that we take are in terms of who is able to enjoy and participate in those events. I mean, I think, in terms of the audience development work that we're involved in, I suppose I would always say, a big part of the Without Walls network is all about taking art, outdoor art, to people in the places where they live and work. So I suppose starting with where you locate things is what I'm trying to say, has a very real impact on the audience that you're going to reach. And I think, really thinking very hard about the consequences of the decisions that one makes about where to actually site pieces of work. And I think going back to that very opening point that we made about hyperlocality, the reason that has become something that we're all talking about in the whole of the arts and cultural network at the moment is because people have been limited in where they've been able to travel to. It has been really putting the spotlight on the importance of taking art to people in their own communities, in the locations where they live and work. So I suppose, there is no easy answer to this, because what is accessible to one person is not necessarily going to be accessible to another. But I think thinking really carefully in the broader sense about those issues of location, but also thinking very carefully about the access issues related to the work that one actually programs. And, the kind of, people need to understand that, need to see something of themselves in the work that is being programmed and understand that it is for them. So it's a much broader issue than it's no easy answers. It's about the program and the selection of the program. It's about looking at who is making the decisions about that program, and are there opportunities to bring in other local communities of a whole variety of different types to kind of be involved in that in some way. And also, thinking about what the experiences that people are going to have when they're actually there, that they feel welcomed, that they, understand that it's something that is for them and that they can participate in. But I'm glad the question has been asked, and I think it's a really important one that goes to the heart of the work that we're trying to do in the way in which it is our responsibility to make sure that the art is reaching the widest possible and most diverse communities possible.
Julie, may I just jump in? Also,
go on, Hannah. Go on, Hannah. Jump in.
Just to bang the drum also of not forgetting that, because you know, we're talking about all those things that you've just explained are really important. But light festivals aren't always something that's put on for people to attend. Light festivals sometimes are entirely created by the community.
Yes.
Place that they're in. So it's an obvious example, but a lantern procession, Ulverston Lantern Procession, been going for nearly 30 years or so. It isn't an event unless it's created by the people in that town. It's their event. It's curated by and produced by some professional artists and producers around the edges. But essentially, it's not something that a community has decided to try and attend. It's been created.
It's a very good point, and thank you very much for jumping in and making it. That's very, very, very good.
Can I add can I add one point to that?
30 seconds, Bettina.
Okay. Festivals of light are free of charge, and they should stay like that. Done.
Yes. Yeah, and
I mean,
yes,
this is the point.
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more, Bettina. And I think pretty much everyone in this chat, I'm fairly sure, would say the same thing. Okay, I will have to leave it there because we've taken up all of our overrun time. I think we could have talked all day, but luckily we have a time limit, so we can stop and we can take a break. Okay, so I'd really like to thank all my panelists today, because that's for me been a very interesting discussion. And I'd like to invite all the panelists now, except for Shumit, please, to switch off their microphones and switch off their video. When you're ready, folks, thank you very much. You can disappear into the ether. I'd like to also say a special thanks to Jess, Adam and Jacob for all the tech that they're doing in the background of the scene. So Shumit, I just want to say thank you very much, Shumit, for making this piece of work that we've all been watching you create, and we're all just going to have a look at that there. So whilst we're watching that looks amazing, thank you. So whilst we're having a last look at that, fantastic. I'm just going to remind people that the final summation will take place in this room in just a moment, and Anne Wishart will be joining us. After that, if you're going to go into one of the breakout rooms, just stay in the room and one of the tech team will magically appear and let you know how to get into one of those breakout rooms that you select from Funding Advice with Arts Council England, meet the producers or meet the artists, and everyone from the panel will be staying on for that. If you are staying for the breakout rooms, just as I said, hang out here. I'd like to now hand over to Anne Wishart. Thank you, Shumit, it's beautiful. I'll hand over to Anne Wishart and say thank you everyone for joining us today.
First of all, can I just say that was a lively discussion, and it was great to hear from everybody and to see Shumit's artwork being created in a response to what everybody was saying. I think the key thing for me is the panellists, if you did ask any questions that weren't answered, will be joining the breakout rooms. So I hope you are able to join for that. And we are going to have a comfort break before we go to the breakout rooms. So I just really want to sort of say thank you to everybody, for joining us over the last 2 days. I hope you have found the sessions of interest, felt inspired for 2021, and have connected with some new people. Last night's session where we sort of networked and chatted actually went on half an hour longer because people wanted to talk, and that's something key that I want to take forward with the network of how can we talk more, how can we share more ideas. But I've had the pleasure of watching all the sessions, and you'll be pleased to know they will all be available on our website in the new year. In our Twilight session, Kat talked about light festivals being accessible and open for all, regardless of gender, age and financial situation, and we've just heard about them being free. Not all festivals are free, but they're different sorts of festivals. So it's how we work with that. And she also talked about how your city is a canvas and how light can highlight and showcase those areas of the city that people may not normally go to. Katie highlighted that their mission with Enchanted Parks was to create an after dark adventure. And Dr. Lovell looked at the history of light and how we can re-enchant space with light. The Inspiring Community session highlighted the importance of involving the local community with examples from Lumiere Durham, as well as Blackpool's very popular Lumidogs workshops and parade. Working with female prisoners, Hannah demonstrated the power of giving everyone a voice. Artists Seb, Akila and Adam talked about how they've had to adapt their work from touch sensors to more movement sensors, and their aspiration for future festivals to be more accessible for artists' engagement and commissions. Today we started with the power of neon, with Professor Toomlin shared the history of neon and how coloured neon was seen as modernity in the 1920s, a symbol of progress and new technology. Jonathan shared his passion for neon as a child and how he created work in his bedroom as a science experiment rather than as art, but with support from the Light Up the North Shine programme, he is now creating work for festivals and exhibitions. Louise and Abby talked about their emerging artists activities, the brilliant programme at Lumiere and the network programme with Light Up the North Shine. Brilliant artist alumni Diane, an environmental artist, talked about her passion for highlighting the issues with waste plastic. She'd found over 40,000 pieces of plastic washed up on her local beach with the way she had exhibited artwork representing the scale of the problem. Gemma participated in the 2019 Shine programme and shared how the scheme supported the development of her artistic work and business needs. Annabeth shared the work and experience of the collaboration model developed with Keys Culture at the University of Salford for their second year animation students for their 2020 project. They worked with the artists and created their own work, which is being displayed as part of the Mystery Bird Tour. And then this final session, our speakers addressed the challenges of COVID, how light festivals develop in the future, how light festivals become sustainable, whether that's environmentally, financial or artistically, and looked at how we can move forward. So if you missed any of these sessions or would like to watch again, the conference videos will be available on the website in the new year. As you know, this conference was brought to you by the Light Up the North Network. We are currently exploring our future plans for the network, including setting up more touring opportunities with festivals outside of the current network, inviting other festivals to present our Shine artists' artwork, as well as new co-commissioning activities and coordinating the presentation of national and international work across the network and country. And we also want to develop a catalogue of work from our network partners. Alongside Light Up the North, there are several networks supporting the delivery of light and outdoor festivals. And I'd like to highlight Outdoor Arts UK, which aims to bring together the many diverse parts of the outdoor arts sector, supporting artists and producers. Outdoor Arts UK provide up-to-date information about professional training and development, and also offer comprehensive listings of what's on and when. And during the pandemic, membership is suspended so anyone can access the services. So that's at Outdoor Arts UK. And again, we have the Without Walls network joining us. Again, they commission work and work together to produce and tour artworks across the country to their partners and to other festivals. I now would like to thank our presenters and panelists for joining us to deliver the conference. Our speakers range from festival producers, event managers, artists, practitioners, curators, local authorities, funders and academics. I would like to thank all our network partners. This conference has been delivered by all 6 of us, and the programme has been managed by Holly Hesson, the Light Up the North programme manager. I would like to thank our BSL interpreters, Ali and Tracy. Thank you for all your hard work over the last 2 days. And also JJA Productions, Jessica, Jacob and Adam for their tech support. This event has been financially supported by the Arts Council England. I would like to say a special thank you to Deborah Best and Catherine Mitchell for their tireless support of light festivals across the country. Deborah will be hosting the funding advice session with Arts Council England in the breakout room shortly. I would like to thank you, our participants. The majority of you work in the arts and are already heavily involved in light festivals as producers and artists, and you are the people that bring joy to our residents. It is you that shows there is light at the end of the tunnel. You are the people that bring spectacle to our cities on dark nights, and for that we should be proud of what we have achieved and what we can achieve. And finally, good luck with your 2021 plans. We look forward to coming to your towns and cities, seeing your artwork, and we hope that you will come to the north and see our amazing events. Let's keep the light shining.